I was thinking back today, like what was the most stressful moment in my life? And all of my most stressful moments, I'm pinning it down to crazy ex-girlfriends. Or sorry, one crazy ex-girlfriend, and you fucking know who you are. And everyone that knows me also knows who it is. But anyways, I had this one crazy ex-girlfriend, dude, and I just remember never feeling like just like enraged. There was one point, dude, where I thought I was gonna lose control. Actually, we had one fight, I remember, and I almost lost control. And I thought that like this should be it. You know what I mean? Because I cannot, let something happen here. And also, she was physically abusive as well, not just emotionally. But I gave her many chances, which, that tells me that it was partially my fault, or actually really mostly, all my fault, really, because if you give someone chances and they continue abusing you, then I mean, that's on you.
Sweet. So we're on. Welcome back to another episode of Idiots Squared, where us two idiots spend time and energy trying to figure out what the hell any of this is. Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of stress, what it is physiologically or physically and psychologically, and what strategies can be used to manage stress or turn negative stresses into positive stresses. Well, for me, I haven't spent the time to think about the most stressful time in my life. But off the top of my head, I've got two sort of situations that sort of stand out to me. One's earlier in my life when I was a child. In certain circumstances or certain events happened in my life that were outside of my control, being a child, and they were based on external actors or other people's actions. And that time in my life was very stressful, and that persisted for quite a few years. But I put that largely down to the fact that I was a child and I was ignorant. I didn't necessarily know how to process things. And I think at that age, you sort of very self-absorbed, like, why me? Why is this happening to me? That kind of thing. And I couldn't really see how someone else might be going through pain or trauma in their life, and that's what might lead them to behave the way that they are. I always, self-reflected on myself, like, what did I do to deserve this, or that kind of thing. And that sort of led to me taking that stress or perceiving that stress or interpreting that stress in a negative way. Right, so it was like distress, okay, as opposed to eustress, which is more of a positive stress. And so that was a big part. That was a formative part of my life that happened early on. And then later on, I would put it down to my belief system that led me to be stressed more often than I needed to be. And so it was sort of that epistemology, or what I believe to be true, that led me to perceive situations or environments or events or actions that happened in the world or in my life to be stressful. And now, knowing what I know now, if I look back, I realize that largely none of those things should have been negatively or distress to me. They shouldn't have been negative, and they shouldn't have been distress. They should have been eustress. But I chose to interpret them in a less than ideal way. Right. And like you said with your example, it was your fault. You sort of created the space for that kind of stress and that abuse to happen. And if you had acted differently or had a different belief system or structure at the time, you could have largely avoided that, right? Or instead of avoiding it, or you could have handled it differently or got out of there earlier without having to go through that. But in saying that, by going through it, you gain perspective. You learn things that you would otherwise not have learned, right? So it's like a bit of a double-edged sword. But I think largely what we can sort of take away from all of that is, like, if you've been through stressful stuff and certain beliefs or behaviors or ways of being led to that stressful stuff, and you've learned from it, don't repeat it, right? If you've already done it and you learn from it, like, learn from it and move on. Stop going through those things. That's when it sort of becomes a negative thing again. But yeah, for me, it was, sort of two phases. Early on in my life, where I let other people's actions stress me out. And then later on in my life, it was my own actions that ended up stressing or applying large amounts of stress to me. And lots of it was psychological. And the interesting thing about the psychological stress is it does turn into physiological stress as well. So when you're psychologically stressed, you can have a cascade of hormones and chemicals that get produced and released in the body that have negative effects over the long term. And so if you live in a state of chronic bad stress or distress, it can essentially break your body down and eat your body away. And so I think I let that affect me for too long in my life. And it was largely because I didn't have the knowledge and I didn't have the belief system that was robust to stress or that would gain from stressful situations. I would let it negatively affect me, if that kind of makes sense. But in talking about all of this, right, like we often think about stress because we're humans just in that psychological sort of aspect. When really stress is let me just intro, like what is stress? Well, stress can be physiological or it can be physical or it could be psychological, right? So in a human sense, it's psychological and physiological, the effects on our body and in our body and in our mind and from our mind into our body, that kind of duality. But then you can talk about stress in engineering terms as well, whereas you can have stresses on an object, right? So you can have if you're designing a bridge, okay, it's very important to understand what stress that bridge can withstand. Yeah, because if you make a bridge that doesn't have a high stress tolerance and then you get more cars going over the bridge than you designed for, then the bridge will break and collapse and lots of bad things happen. Yeah. But not all stress is bad is the sort of main takeaway. Like, I think we inherently sort of think that stress is this bad thing. I don't know if that was your sort of opinion of stress, or is that your opinion of stress? I can ask you.
It's not actually. I believe that there are situations where stress is very necessary, and a lot of situations in life where you need stress in order to motivate you in a lot of aspects of your life, like your financial life, your relationships, your hobbies. Like if you don't have a certain level of stress, I don't think you can perform at your peak performance in many things that you do. So I think there needs to be some level of, I could say worriness. I think certain types of worriness is a stress. And if you worry too much about things, right, it can have negative effects because of the stress that it generates. But if you're worried about your future, to a certain amount, we could say a healthy amount, which would be very difficult to judge. But I believe that you need a certain level of worriness about your future in order to be successful in your future. You also need a little bit of worriness with your friends and family that, I need to act a certain way and do certain things to make others happy, or I shouldn't do certain things that are going to affect others emotionally. So you need to understand like what makes people tick in your close relationships in order to adapt to those certain things, to have relationships that flourish, right? Because relationships are difficult and they take work. So there's things that you need to be very open-minded and adaptive. And that is also a certain stress. And again, if that's something you're worried too much about, it could have negative health effects on your body.
Yeah. So stress isn't inherently good or bad, right? It's contextually dependent, right? So it depends on the context. And it also depends on your belief system and your epistemology as to how you interpret what's happening, whether or not you interpret positively or negatively. I think that's a really important thing to make. So stress isn't inherently good or bad. It's just a force or that's one way of describing it. In physics, you would say that it's a stressor is a force applied to an object. And so we can say that, and I'm pretty confident in that. And what you just mentioned about being mindful of how to interact with others and what you should or shouldn't do you I understand what you say. I think I understand what you mean when you say that, but it sounds to me as if that might be quite tiring, right? Like if you're always having to think about how others are going to perceive you, does that become a negative stress? Like, have you experienced that where that sort of, does it bog you down at times, or has it bogged you down at times?
Okay, yeah. So I'll expand on that a little bit. No, I don't feel bogged down about that at all, but that could be because my ability to cope with stress. I'm a person who, in a stressful moment, like it will stress me out for like a moment, and then I'm fine. I can go on with my day and not even worry about it anymore. I don't let things like affect my day. Like I'm very conscious of like, okay, like this happened. It is what it is. Let's move on. We could still have a great day. So when I talk about relationships, I had this conversation with my mom recently, and I was telling her about my relationship with my wife. And there are certain things that my wife appreciates, right? When I do something special for her, and I've learned what those special things are, and and I learned how she likes certain things as well. And because I was never a person in a relationship to go out of my way and do special things like, or be super, super considerate of the other person. Like I think I was a shitty boyfriend in most of my relationships because of that. And so in this relationship, like I wanted to make it work. So I understand like, okay, I'll give you a real example. So I'm at a cafe with my mom, right? And we're having coffee there and cake, and I'm eating this cake, and it's really good. And my wife calls me that she's on her way to the cafe to meet us, right? And I'm eating this cake. She calls me, and I put the phone down, and I save half of the cake. And my mom's like, "Well, why aren't you eating that cake?" And I said, "Oh, because Miss Bunny's coming, and I know that she would love to try this cake because it's really good, and she'd be really appreciative that I left half for her and waited, because she knows how addicted I am to chocolate and cakes and shit. Like leaving half for me is difficult, so she would be really appreciative of it, right?" And my mom said to me, "Well, like, why are you always like, why are you worried about that?" And I'm like, it's not that like I'm necessarily worried about it, or like if she would be upset if I didn't leave her the half. It's just that I just know that she's going to be really appreciative. So I have to consciously look for things, because I like making people happy, right? But I wouldn't say it's a huge load that I'm taking on, but I enjoy doing certain things, and I get enjoyment out of it. But at the same time, I have to be conscious that it's a requirement that I do go out of my way for the people I love, to show them that I love them, because everyone's love language is different. And if you don't understand the love language of your loved ones, then you can generate certain problems. And I think it's important to try and being considerate, but obviously at the same time, it is a bit stressful, because like it's something you have to keep in mind all the time. So it's hard to say. Like as I'm talking, Rubes, I'm starting to like realize that, because I opened this answer up with no, like it's not like affecting me in a negative way. But as I'm talking, it sounds like it could, right?
Yeah. That's why I asked you.
Yeah, but because I'm going back to.
You go.
Sorry, I just want just one last thing. My ability to handle stress is very good. It's always been good. I don't know if I was just born with it or I learned it. But yeah, I'm just very, very good at handling stress. Like I'm never, like I said, I don't, like nothing ruins my day.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a great way to be. No, the reason I asked you is because in doing that, what you described is you're essentially thinking, you're doing like counterfactual sort of reasoning, right? Where you're sort of thinking like, oh, how is this person going to perceive or react or behave in this situation if I do this or if I do that? And that requires time and energy on your part, right? And so you're essentially doing a bit of thinking about or for someone else. And I don't think that's not inherently good or bad. It is what we make of it, right? But I could understand and I could see how that could become very cumbersome. Like if you're doing that for a lot of your actions or your activities, it's like it takes a lot, you know what I mean? Like that's a lot of thinking that you would end up having to do. And that's why I asked that question. But I agree with you. It's what you make of it. Okay. And as long as you're not doing things continuously to have to make people happy, you're doing it because you can and you want to. Perfect. All right. And then it'll likely get to the point where your behavior just subconsciously or intrinsically is the things that, help to improve the quality of other people's day. But I think where it can become dangerous is that if you're doing that to make people happy because they themselves, intrinsically within themselves, can't make themselves happy. Or, right, counterfactually, like we could say, if you're doing that because your wife would get there, and if you'd eaten it all, they would get the shits at you. Like I think that's a toxic thing, right? If you're doing it because the other person would intrinsically take it as a negative, and you're having to counteract that negative by augmenting your behavior and saving it, right? Just because they would get upset with you otherwise. I think that would be a bad use of it, right? But then there's another solution to that problem, which is just like eat all the cake and just order another slice that's ready for her when she gets there. That's another way to do it. You know what I mean? So there's lots of different paths to solve that problem. But no, the main sort of thing with that is finding, or again, sort of developing your beliefs and your epistemology so that your actions are what you want them to be. They're aligned with who you want to be. And I think you're a kind and caring person. And so you're just sort of becoming more aware of how much control you have over the impact you can have on other people. And I think that that's largely a really good thing, right? If it's used like that. But if you're doing it to have to account for the fact that other people, on average might perceive things to be bad or negative, then that could be troublesome in the future. And I think like that's sort of the root of a lot of toxic relationships or toxic codependencies, if that kind of resonates. Like you mentioned initially your bad relationship with all the stress in it. It sounds as if that relationship could have been a toxic codependency. Does that sort of resonate or make sense, that word?
Yeah, I mean, you've nailed it on the head. Definitely. Sorry, I got distracted because like this huge moth came into my house. Like I hope it flies by so you guys can see it. I've never seen one this big. Like it's massive. Okay, but anyways, I have been in a relationship where I needed to constantly like be careful of making a mistake, and it's not even necessarily a mistake. It's just like a perceived mistake by my partner, right? Something that, is completely made up and irrational. So I would be tiptoeing around that, dude. And that fucking sucks, man. Like walking on eggshells. Yeah, that's, so I'm able to tell the difference. I don't have that now. That's why I'm with the person I'm with. But I've had that before. And I think it's good that I've had that before to understand what that looks like and what that is. Sometimes when you're in the moment, dude, you just like in the relationship and you're being a fucking idiot, and it's not until like, even when your friends can tell you, your family can tell you're being an idiot, but it's not until like it's actually over and you go back and reflect, can you really, for me anyways, personally, can you actually like really learn and grow from it? Because in the moment, it's hard to have a healthy perspective.
Hey guy, love can be blinding.
Yeah, love is blind.
Power that pussy,
Yeah.
Or dick, whatever you're into, or I don't know what else other people are into, but yeah, whatever your poison, it can be addictive. I think that's the main takeaway. But again, like you said, so that to me was that example I was trying to hint at with the tiring. Like that's really tiring, constantly having to worry about how you behave because you can't rely on how the person will interpret it. And I think a good example of this is like, say, let's use the cake example, not exactly where you were, but let's just use a cake example where you're eating a piece of cake at a cafe and you're with a different partner, and you ate all the cake, and then they turn up and they go, "You didn't save me any? You didn't save me any? You didn't think to save me some," or something like that. And you go, like, why choose to see it that way? Why not choose to say, "Oh, was that cake delicious?" And then you answer like, yeah, it was delicious. Like I couldn't stop eating it. They're like, "Oh, I'd really like to try a piece. I'm going to order one." That's two different ways to take that situation. One's negative, one's positive. But we can't account for how people choose to take things.
Sorry, I just want to add to that. That's like a very modest version, because the version I've experienced is yo, now the cake is our whole fucking relationship. And you're a fucking piece of shit because you never think of me. You never think of me. I'm always the last on your list. Your friends first, your family first. And then it goes out into the parking lot. It's in front of other people now. And then you're just trying to like put your head down. Nobody's looking at me. Please, nobody's looking at me. You get in the car and the yelling continues. And then a fight starts. Because why aren't you getting mad? Why aren't you arguing with me? Why are you just being quiet? Sorry.
Yeah, I think you did a lot more justice. That's for sure. The funny thing is I thought my example was extreme until you showed me yours.
Here's the thing. Your example is extreme. What you said is extreme, but like people are just so far fucking crazy that they think that your example is not crazy, but it is crazy.
Yeah. There's levels. There's levels to everything.
Yeah, exactly. But sorry, continue with what you were saying, dude.
Well, so I just was saying, like, that's the beauty of updating one's belief system or having a better or more useful epistemology is that you can learn that things aren't inherently good or bad. They're actually what we make them. Right. So if you are someone who does get the shits because your partner ate all the cake and didn't save you any or whatever, like try reframing that. Try reframing it to say like, oh, well, that means it must have been delicious. And if it's that delicious, like I'll get myself a piece. Or find ways to not get offended. But I think it can be common with certain subsets of the population to just like sort of their prerogative is to be offended and to get upset and to get triggered. And I just think that is a useless model. I think that's when the stress becomes negative, and that's when it has real negative effects on a human or on a person and on relationships as well. But as a sort of more sort of structured way of discussing this, I use ChatGPT to do a bit of a roundup on stress. Yeah,
love ChatGPT.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. I have a
dude. I was actually gonna bring up ChatGPT, so I'm blowing my load right now. This is mad exciting.
We can use. Okay. So, can you see that?
No, I can't. Oh, something's popping up. Yeah, here we go. Stress. Do you mind making it a little bit? Oh, there we go.
So, stress. What is it? The physical and psychological aspects of it, and how can we better deal with it? So, ChatGPT came up with a good answer. I will preface this with I did prompt it ahead of time with a bunch of different prompts to sort of get it in the mood for this and to like sort of focus it in on what we were looking to discuss. So it says, stress is a complex and multifaceted concept that is relevant to many aspects of human experience. Physically, stress is a response to a demand or threat, and it involves the release of chemicals and hormones in the body that help us to cope with the situation. These chemicals and hormones have both positive and negative effects on the body and mind. Psychologically, stress is often experienced as feelings of anxiety or overwhelm in response to a challenging or difficult situation. Stress can be either good or bad, depending on the context and the individual's perception and response to it. Good stress, or eustress, can be motivating and can help individuals perform at their best. On the other hand, bad stress or distress can be overwhelming and can have negative consequences for health and well-being. So, Guy, you pretty much said that in a different way. So you said some stress is good because it motivates, too much can be bad. Yeah, so it's kind of like dose dependent and context dependent.
I do like the way that you put it earlier, though, that it's neither good or bad. There's just, how did you put it?
Well, stress is neither good nor bad. It is what we make of it.
Right. Yeah. Like I kind of.
That's with everything. That's everything, Guy. That's death, birth. It's all things are what we make of it. It's really interesting, and we can dig into that. So I'll finish reading this, and we can have a chat about it. So there are many ways that humans can deal with stress better, including finding healthy ways to cope with stress, such as exercising or practicing relaxation techniques, and learning how to set boundaries, and prioritize self-care. Sound familiar? Epistemology, or the study of knowledge and belief, can also play a role in stress, as a person's beliefs and perspective can influence how they perceive and respond to stressful events or circumstances. A growth mindset, which is the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and practice, can help to reduce stress and improve performance. While a fixed mindset, which is the belief that abilities and intelligence are fixed, can increase stress and decrease performance. Overall, stress is a natural and inevitable part of life, and it is important to learn how to manage it in order to maintain overall health and well-being. By understanding stress and finding healthy ways to cope with it, we can empower ourselves to live our best lives and thrive in the face of challenges and difficulties. So it's important to recognize and manage stress in order to maintain overall health and well-being. I think that was pretty good. Like, chat, I did go through a big sequence of prompts and mentioning, epistemology, mentioning growth mindset versus fixed mindset, etc., to try and get it into that. And that's a summary of those things. But yeah, I thought that was really useful. So we can post a link to this doc and some strategies in the episode as well. But was there anything in there that sort of stood out to you or resonated again? Because that's kind of what we just discussed.
Like legit, dude, the part you mentioned about the boundaries, how it pertained to me, that was funny. But I still actually have issues with that. You know, even though I'm aware of it, I'm trying to get better at it. We've talked about this on a previous podcast. I don't remember which one it was now, but what did we talk about? Where, oh fuck, it slipped my mind, dude.
Stress, boundaries, putting up boundaries.
Yeah. Oh, it was about being yourself. That's what it was. And we talked about how it's important that you be yourself, and how you've managed to achieve a level where it doesn't bother you if you are bothering certain people in certain situations, because it's not that you're doing anything wrong. You're just being you, and you've come to understand that, like, it's okay. You're not going to make everyone happy. Where I have a little bit difficulty with that. I have a little bit of more of a need to make everyone like me around me and everyone happy. However, I am conscious, and I'm trying to change that about myself, because it's not realistic.
Yeah. The simple answer to that, or the simple statement to that, is give less fucks.
Yeah. Do you mind stop sharing, guy?
Yeah, one sec.
Yo, so the audience can see our sexy faces better, guy.
I need to remember how to do that. That better?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, So one thing to say about that, right? So, what you just said about you're still like quite mindful about how others perceive you, or how your actions will impact others around you. There's a fantastic movie with Mark Wahlberg from like the early 2000s called The Big Hit. Have you ever seen that movie? He's like an assassin, or like a trained sort of killer. And he has this
sounds good.
It's really good. Mark Wahlberg, obviously legend actor, like pretty decent guy, or pretty decent actor.
Yeah.
I don't know him personally, but he plays a character in this movie that is like an assassin, or like a hitman, essentially, a gun for hire. But he has this complex where he needs everyone to like him. And essentially what it shows is just how people, like, if you need people to like you, then there are people who can realize that and then capitalize or parasitize your kindness for their own gain. And it can essentially destroy you. But it's a really good movie, really exciting way to sort of go through that. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it. But I can resonate with that too, because there's been times in my life where I have had that exact same thing, and I still have it to a degree, right? I'm not perfect, but I'm improving upon that, and like you mentioned before, like getting to that point where you just don't give as much of a fuck about those things is very freeing. And it can be like a big weight gets lifted off your shoulders, and that ties back into that tiring. Like if you're always worrying about how other people are going to perceive what you're doing, it sort of takes away from the joy of being in the moment and just being yourself. Now, I'd preface that with obviously make sure being yourself doesn't necessarily or deliberately harm others, that kind of thing. But don't shrink yourself just to make other people feel okay around you. Be you. And if people have a problem with that, well, that's their problem. If what you're doing isn't physically harming others, so to speak. I also think it's a good thing to mention at this point. There used to be a very popular saying that I remember from growing up, and where I grew up, this was how it was said. Where you grew up, it might have been different, but it was, "Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me." And in the modern age, I feel like we've kind of inverted that, where it's like sticks and stones won't do anything, but names will really hurt you. Names are violence, words are violence. And I think we've got it backwards now. I really think that sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me is a significantly more robust way to live one's life, right? So that in that sense, words are not violence. Words are just words. That kind of makes sense. What about you? Was it a similar saying where you were?
Yeah, it was exactly the same. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Yeah, it was word for word the exact same.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But do you feel the same in this modern age, right? I also think that's contributing to societal stress, right? We now let words, serious, when I say we, I'm saying people, let words affect us significantly more than they probably should.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt. There's people losing jobs over words. There was a guy recently I saw, I think on a YouTube video, they were discussing how it was a Apple exec or some guy high up, and he had a video on this guy's TikTok channel. And this guy's TikTok channel, what he does is I guess he finds nice cars, and he goes up to the people who own the cars to ask them how, what they do, how they got that car, I suppose. And it just so happened that it was this guy from Apple. And he said something he said something jokingly about fondling breasts or another, but his wife was with him. And he just mentioned fondling women's breasts, that he enjoys fondling women's breasts or something like that. I'm taking it out of context a little bit here though, but if you watch the video, it's just whatever, right? The wife was laughing, it was fine, it was fine. But he lost his job because that video went viral, and it's just it's absurd, it's complete absurdity. I mean,
but this is the lynch mob, this is the cancel culture coming out.
Yeah.
All because of words. You can interpret words however you choose to. Again, the meaning we associate to words is the meaning we associate to it. You can choose to interpret something negatively or positively. It's your choice, though. And so I think we've sort of got a good percentage of society has fallen into the trap of choosing to take offense to things, or deliberately getting offended at things, or taking things out of context, or making things hyperbolic, going to an extreme. He said fondling breasts, so he must be a rapist or something, some sort of crazy stuff like that. And it's no, he was obviously trying to make a joke. And if he's involved in Apple, he's obviously a bit of a tech guy, so he's probably not that socially skilled, and so his joke probably was just a flop. Now the guy lost his job because he tried to make a funny joke that wasn't that funny. But yeah, it's interesting, right? And so this all ties into stress, because whenever you choose to take something in a negative way, or choose to perceive it badly, you're actively stressing yourself out. Okay, you're producing negative affect, so you have a poison released inside you because of that. And so you think that you're doing this social justice by causing an uproar about this person's words, when really you're just poisoning yourself. And then you're spreading that poison to others, which is just a bonkers concept to think about. So we can dig in. So I think a lot of people do get confused with stress. Okay, so we can go through some common examples of stresses that people might not think are stresses. Okay, so one common one that I deal with all the time is training. Training in the gym or physical activity or physical exercise is a form of stress. All right, but it's dose dependent. Okay, so how much you do dictates the level of stress. And like we mentioned, stress is not good nor bad. It is what sort of pick it and the dose dependency. So, if you haven't never trained before, going in and doing some, Olympic weightlifters program is going to be incredibly stressful for you, right? And it's likely going to be a bit too much stress, right? That will take your body a long time to recover from. And if you apply too much stress to something, in a physics sense, if you apply too much stress to a bridge, it'll break. If you apply too much stress to a stick, it'll snap. Okay. If you apply too much stress to a human body, it will also break. And so this is, where people can come, they've got good intentions by going to train. They don't really realize that training is a stress. They do too much of it and then they damage themselves or they break something in their body or they dig a hole or the hole that's too deep and their body can't recover from that. So another thing that's very, very popular nowadays and I think is very beneficial for people is ice baths. Right? So ice baths are fantastic at improving body composition, teaching you how to deal with stressful situations because getting into an ice bath is a form of stress. That's why when you get in, almost every cell in your body sends a signal to your brain that says, get the fuck out of here. That's why it's so hard to do them, right? Is because every cell in your body that's touching the cold water or the ice is saying, get out. This is not good for us. We will die if we stay here, kind of thing. But the beauty of the ice bath is that learning to get into that and control your state and to not listen to that fight or flight mechanism teaches you how to control the stress or teaches you how to handle stress or teaches you how to control your state in a stressful environment. And that's a meta skill because that translates to every other thing in life, right? So you said you've got a good ability to deal with stress. That's a skill that you have developed over time, okay? And it's because of the reps you've done in stressful situations that have got you to that point. And so you can use ice baths to do that. You can use sauna, you can use training, you can use all these different things, but they're all forms of stress. So like stress can be positive, but stress can also be negative. It's dose dependent and context dependent.
Would you say you have work stresses? And if you do, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with the stress? Not with the situation, but the stress itself.
In terms of business?
Yeah, like if you have a stressful situation that's popped up, how do you deal with that stress so it doesn't consume you?
So the technique that I've used, the technique that I've found to be most useful is to batch it into two different categories. All right. So what's causing the stress? Can I do anything to change it? Okay, so that's one category. And then the other category is I asked that question, is it something that I can affect? Okay. If it is, then I'll do whatever I can to affect it. If it isn't, if it's outside of my control, what's happening in the physical world or what's causing that stress, then all I can do is change my perception of that stress. Yeah. So it's either what can I control? What can't I control? Okay. So if it falls into the I can't control, then I can control how I perceive it. So I change that. Yeah. But if it falls into the I can control it category, I'll do whatever I need to do to handle that stress. And I think a lot of stress persists over time because we don't embrace doing those things that we could do because we tell ourselves we shouldn't have to, or I shouldn't have to do that, or that's their problem, not my problem, whatever. But it becomes your problem if you're getting stressed. That kind of makes sense. Have you got a strategy?
Absolutely. My strategy is very simple. Like it's not anything complicated. I just like if I feel I'm getting upset about something, I'll just like take a step back and I'll think, hey, why is this upsetting me? And I'll like analyze it just very quickly. And then I'm like, well, that's stupid. That's like, who gives a shit? Like, what's the point of, being upset about this? Like, might as well just move on and be happy. And it literally just takes me like, depending on like, if it's something like really intense, it might take me a couple minutes, but if it's something like whatever, then it just like goes away almost instantly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do.
I remember in Canada, when I was living in Canada, we have a lot of issues with getting internet guys to show up and hook up the internet. I
think that's a universal problem.
Okay. And I remember this, they call us, they're like, yeah, we should have a guy over there in a couple hours. Okay, perfect. Because like I was studying at the time, I need to do homework, I need to internet's vital for anything nowadays. But anyways, guy doesn't show up, right? So we call and, oh, that's weird. He, it says here he was supposed to be there. Okay, well, he didn't come. Okay, we'll send a guy tomorrow. Next day, dude doesn't show up. Call again. Okay, well, sorry about that. We'll have a guy there next week. I'm like, next week? Yeah, we're really busy right now. I'm like, yo, but you guys fucked up twice. Like, you got to send someone, right now. Like, that's crazy. I can't wait a week. I need this done now. Sorry, sir, can't help you. We're busy right now. And then that was it. That guy didn't show up for 2 fucking weeks. And I remember being like quite pissed off about that a number of times. But thankfully, I had someone living upstairs, and I was using their internet for the time being. So it wasn't the end of the world. But I just remember like for some reason that situation really pissed me off. And the way I dealt with it is I just logically said, well, like you can't control other people. You can't control actions of other people. You can't control that business. If you get mad and yell at them, that's not going to solve anything. Getting frustrated also doesn't solve the problem. You have some options. You either get a different internet company, or you just be patient, wait for this one. You continue using the person upstairs. So really, like, being frustrated, getting angry with them isn't going to change anything. So the only thing I do have control of is of myself and the way I feel and my emotions. So if I let something so ridiculous make me this mad, like that's kind of on me now. I'm choosing to be upset at this point. So yeah, fuck it. I'll just, when it comes, it comes. It is what it is. And it was all good.
Yeah. So a lot of the time it comes from our expectations. We expect something to go a certain way, and when it doesn't, we get upset or get pissed off. But you hit on one thing in that and one in the previous thing, and I'll just address the first one. So you hit on a really key thing so you couldn't control what was happening with them. You could try and ring, but what you were doing wasn't working. So then you came up with a solution that was outside of their control. You had someone upstairs that had internet, so you could utilize that. So you took the power back to yourself. Instead of blame, you took ownership and thought, well, what can I do? And then so you went and did that. That's why it wouldn't have been as stressful as it otherwise would have been if you didn't do that. So you could have gone to the library, you could do all different things. But if you're not willing to do those things, you'll get stressed out beyond measure. And so that's why I deliberately break those things up into those 2 categories. Is this something I can control, or is this outside of my control? All right. And I always, even if it's outside of my control, I can always control how I choose to react or respond or perceive it. That kind of makes sense. And then the other thing that you addressed previously was you said I zoom out a bit, right? When something's happening that's very stressful and how you deal with it, you said you zoom out. And that is an incredibly powerful technique, right? So when we're really zoomed in or focused in on something, we can sort of make it anything we want to. Right? Because we're so down in or so close to it, right? It can seem so much bigger than what it really is. And by zooming out, you gain a broader perspective, okay? So you can see it in more context. And you can ask yourself, like, is this really going to matter long term? And a lot of the time what ends up happening when you zoom out is you end up shrinking the thing that's so big to you in the moment. You end up shrinking it to realize that it's this inconsequential thing. It's nothing really, right? And that's a great strategy to help get over things because you're able to see it in a larger context. So zooming in and zooming out are very powerful tools for managing stress as well, which is also what you sort of said. But it's such an interesting concept because it's so pervasive. We all experience stresses, but I don't think that stress management or dealing with stress or understanding what stress really is, that knowing that it isn't inherently good or bad, I don't hear that talked about a lot. Is that something you hear talked about a lot?
No. You're right. You actually never do, because there are lots of ways that there's a lot of different interventions you could do to actually alleviate stress. If it's diet, or like you mentioned earlier, exercise, being in healthy relationships. So, and like the GPT answer said, that a lot of stress comes from external factors. So if you don't learn about how to control some of your external factors, or like I mentioned, do some sort of intervention, you won't be able to get out of living a stressful lifestyle. And no, I'm still thinking about it. And no, I've never heard of that being like a thing. I feel like most people who are really stressful would probably think about medications before other types of interventions first. I think like naturally people sort of, what's the word?
Path of least resistance.
Yeah.
It's just I can just take a tablet and I'll feel better. No worries. Instead of dealing with the underlying issue, right? And it requires work. It requires changing yourself to a degree, and that's pretty hard. And the human brain, or our consciousness, likes to be consistent, like it likes to keep doing what it's done. Change is hard in that respect. It takes time and energy. And if you're constantly stressed out, you probably don't have the spare time and energy to really sort of do that. So I get why it's a hard problem. You mentioned something about nutrition. So we can talk about, like, this is a thing. Stress is a concept that is sort of pervasive across so many different things. So we talked about the psychology, like your belief system, epistemology, and how you choose to perceive things can be stressful or like eustress, which is good stress, or distress, which is bad stress. But that same concept can be applied to nutrition, right? So if you eat certain foods, that can be stressful for your physiology, right? And then that physiology can impact your psychology. Okay, so if you're eating foods that are sort of, slowly poisoning you, or even fast poisoning, or foods that aggravate your biology. So one example that's an interesting one to think about is chili. So a lot of people, like I really used to love chili. I still enjoy some chili every now and then, but I don't eat it regularly for the following reason. People, when you eat a chili, you feel a burning sensation. Okay, so you would interpret that, if you didn't think through it enough, you would actually think that the chili is burning me, right? I think that's common. Like, most people think chilies burn, right? Hot chilies really burn, but they don't burn you. It's not actually burning. Chilies work via this capsaicin, this little sort of like biological stabber, right? Or molecular stabber, right? So chilies, the capsaicin is like this tiny little spike thing that just stabs you. Okay. And so our bodies interpret that continuous stabbing as heat. So we feel it as a burning sensation, when really it's just these tiny little things stabbing us continuously. And that's what chilies do. That's how they create that burning sensation. So if you eat a lot of chilies and you're not really used to that stabbing, your body hasn't adapted to become more robust against the stabbing, that's going to be really stressful, right? Eating lots and lots of sugar is really stressful. Not eating enough food is really stressful. Not eating enough essential nutrients or being deficient in some is stressful for your body. Eating too many calories is stressful for your body. Continuously having to make fat cells and store energy or lipids in those fat cells, and then having all those fat cells that produce different hormones and cytokines and things like that, is stressful for your body. Carrying extra weight on your body is extra stress on your body. Not sleeping is stress. Like all these things are forms of stress. Okay. And so it isn't about minimizing stress. It's actually about finding ways to deal with that stress. And in a nutrition standpoint, it's about understanding what foods are stressful to you as an individual, right? And what foods are not as stressful, or what foods can you eat that nourish you appropriately with the least amount of stress. Yeah. Because we don't need a huge amount of stress from our food. We can get stress from all these other places. Yeah. You want to try and minimize that stress from your food. But yeah, I just thought it's interesting. Like stress touches almost everything. It's a kind of meta concept.
The funniest example for me is if you talk to someone who smokes, like right before a cigarette, they'll feel like a little bit anxious. That's because like that addiction part of their brain is kicking in, being like, yo, we need, we need that drug, like let's go out and smoke that. Yeah, we need a hit. So a smoker will begin to like feel a little bit uncomfortable, and then, all right, I need to go for a smoke. They'll come back in and then they'll be totally relaxed. And they'll tell people, oh, like I smoke because it relaxes me. No, that's not why you're smoking. You're smoking because you're addicted to smoking, and to alleviate your anxiety, your stress, you need to have a smoke. But if you never smoked to begin with, you wouldn't have that added stress in your life that you need to relieve with another fucking cigarette.
Yeah, correct. So it's kind of like first level looking at it versus second level. The second level is the truer level. But on the surface, it's just like, no, smoking reduces my stress and my anxiety. Like, yeah, but if you never started smoking, you wouldn't have the not smoking stress, anxiety, and juice that forces you to then want to smoke. But yeah, no, I get what you mean. So it's interesting because it's such a pervasive thing. Like it really does go across so many things. So for people, what strategies can you use, right? Well, firstly, the most important thing I think is understanding that stress is not good or bad. Okay, we said that a bunch. Okay, it is what you make of it. Now, your ability to deal with stress or handle stress, right, is dependent on your historical levels of stress and how you dealt with them. So it's like training. Okay, if you haven't trained a lot, doing a humongous session with lots of different, exercises and all the weight in the world and all this other stuff, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad for you. It's going to be very stressful. Whereas you want to gradually just increase your ability to handle it. Okay, over time. So the more stress you've been through and been able to handle, so to speak, the more stress you sort of can handle in the future. And you want to come up with strategies so that stressful situations are not as stressful as they would otherwise be without those strategies. Yeah. So learning how to change your perception of things, learning how to zoom in and zoom out so that you can see it in a greater context. Learning how to breathe. Breathing is so important for your state. All right. And if you are stressed, then your state is a stressed state. Okay. And if you don't want to be in a stressed state, learning to breathe is probably the most powerful tool for changing that state. Okay. So something as simple as the physiology of the stress is it's typically associated with a faster heart rate and shorter breaths, that fight or flight. And just by taking 2 or 3 big, deep breaths in and exhaling, that kind of thing, right? So that big inhale, that big exhale changes the tone of your vagal nerve, which runs from your heart to your brain and can calm your state, which allows the things to your experience of these circumstances or these stresses to be very different, right? And so simple tools just like that, like if you find yourself getting stressed or worked up, learning how to just take 2 or 3 big deep breaths before you do anything, I've found to be very powerful for myself. You practice any of that?
I've never practiced any breathing techniques, to be honest. Like I've done them on occasion, but no, I actually haven't consciously needed or felt that I need to breathe to, or just never thought of it, to be honest, in the moment. But I agree, it can be a very good strategy. Even me just doing it like right now, those 2 breaths, relaxing. Like it is relaxing. Like it legit works. So it's great. It's great advice. for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's often under sort of it's not really talked about, but it's also I think it should be common knowledge. I think these are the sorts of things we should be teaching kids in like kindergarten and primary school. I think it would change their experience of everything from that point onwards, learning how to sort of better control one's state. So I would challenge anyone who's listening to next time they find themselves in a stressful or frustrating or aggravating or annoying situation to just stop, take 2 or 3 nice deep breaths and see how you feel, see how it changes your perception of that situation. And then let us know. Big time, let us know. But yeah, it's crazy how not talked about breath work is for how powerful it is for your state change, right? And state change is so important. All we are is, the state we're in now and the state we're in the future, et cetera. It's just state changes all the way, all right? And so, knowing how to control or change that state is such a powerful tool. And you think about and I've done this with kids, you see kids, they start getting worked up, and you can just see that there's this overwhelming set of emotions or experiences that they don't really know how to handle, right? To the point where they're just about to explode. And you just, if they're old enough to listen to you in that regard, hey, just take a big breath with me, big inhale, big exhale. And if they're not old enough, right, you can just hold them close to you or get them close and they're sort of mimetic. They'll sort of vibe off your vibe. So if you start taking nice big breaths, they sort of subconsciously start mimicking your behavior and start taking those big deep breaths. But most of the big problems or the meltdowns that kids have, I think, come from that inability to control their state. And so teaching them how to breathe like that, it's super powerful. Super, super powerful.
Damn, I love that, dude. I love that. So yeah, like Rube said, just consciously try and breathe to sort of calm yourself down. And yeah, if you agree that breathing helps, leave a comment. If you think we're fucking idiots, also let us know in the comment section. Remember to give this video a like and share with your friends and family. I gotta bounce because my family's waiting downstairs, and it's literally New Year's night for me right now.
Yes. Oh, Happy New Year, guy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, bro. Happy New Year, bro. Yeah.
2023, big thing coming.
Next week we'll be back to normal, where we can do a longer format. But it's funny because we did one Christmas, and then
New Year. Works perfect. Yeah. Just quickly, so before you go, and I won't hold you up from your family too longer, but I think a cool podcast is I never really used to plan my year ahead, right? I kind of just free float with it. But I do think that there is some value in putting a loose structure in place and sort of outlining certain things that you'd like to achieve in the year. So maybe next week we can discuss something like that, like how to put that together, what would be a good strategy for that, and then how to sort of action that, or what sort of behaviors or habits could you get into that will help you maximize for achieving those goals that you've sort of set for yourself. And so goals are useful in a certain sense. I don't think that they're the be all and end all. I think systems and procedures are. And so what sort of systems and procedures can you put in place to sort of help you achieve the things that you might like to achieve? So yeah, if we're down, we can do that next week.
Dude, I fucking love it, yo. That's a great idea. So,
and we can do it ourselves. Yeah. And then we can put the framework up for everyone else.
Okay.
That'll make us do it, right? And then in a year's time, we can check back and be like, yo, did we do it? And because we're idiots, we probably won't, right? But if we do, we nailed it.
Yeah, so tune in next week because that's going to be a dope episode, 100%.
All right, guys. Peace. Happy New Year's. Enjoy your family time. Peace and love to all the people watching this. Happy New Year to you as well. Have a great year.
Yeah, Happy New Year's, bro. Love you, man.
Peace.
Peace.